Years ago, when I was still a detective with the county sheriff's department, I worked a case that was so bizarre, so profoundly disturbing, it seared itself into my memory. The depravity of it went so far beyond the pale that it shattered my worldview. The whole thing was just a tragedy, plain and simple. But the sadness I felt wasn't just because of the things you expect in a case like this. The rape, the dismemberment, the kind of gruesome details that keep you up at night. The victim in this case was a 10-year-old girl from a little village on the outskirts of town, a bright kid named Lily Anderson. She was a straight A student, bubbly and outgoing, the kind of kid everyone loved. Teachers, classmates, you couldn't find a person with a bad word to say about her. The suspect was a 52-year-old hog farmer from the same village, a man named Bert Hawkins. He was a big, beefy guy with a face full of hard lines and a thick neck. He got married more than 20 years back, but after they had a son with a severe intellectual disability, his wife took off and never looked back. For years, it had just been him and his son, Cody, living in a small apartment built over the pigsty. To most folks, Bert seemed harmless enough. Whenever he drove into town for supplies, he'd always buy extra candy to hand out to the local kids. When anyone asked why, he'd say his own boy wasn't right in the head and that seeing healthy, smart kids just made him want to do something nice for them. The truth was much darker. He was laying the groundwork for his crime. After seeing him a few times and getting candy, the kids in the village let their guard down around him. And that's how Lily Anderson's nightmare began. One afternoon after school, she vanished. Her family searched everywhere, and when night fell with no sign of her, they called it in. Deputies started the investigation, beginning with security camera footage to trace her steps. The school's cameras showed Lily leaving for home, just like any other day. There were cameras along the main road leading from town to the village, but they stopped at the village entrance. All the footage could confirm was that Lily had made it back to the village. That ruled out a snatch and grab by an outsider. No suspicious people or vehicles had been seen entering or leaving the area. The next day, our detective unit took over. My captain, Dave Miller, led a team to help with a full-scale search of the village. During the search, a couple of my colleagues noted Bert Hawkins's hog farm was set back on a hillside, isolated from the rest of the village. Then, one of the deputies found something in the corner of a pig pen, tiny shredded fragments of what looked like human tissue. When Captain Miller got the call, he ordered all of us to the farm immediately. We quickly secured Bert Hawkins and began a grid search of the entire property. The situation devolved into our worst-case scenario. We kept finding more fragments of human tissue. The medical examiner, Dr. Evans, arrived on scene. A quick field test confirmed our fears. It was human skin and flesh. As for whose, that would require a full lab analysis. But Dr. Evans also noted that the amount of tissue was far too small. There were no bones. It wasn't nearly enough to account for a whole person, not even a 10-year-old girl. Miller, his face flushed with rage, nearly lost it. He gave an order I'll never forget. Slaughter every damn pig on this property. I want their stomachs. He had a team brought in to start the butchering immediately, before the animals could digest anything else. Walking into the farmhouse, Miller was practically shaking. He grabbed Bert Hawkins and slapped him hard across the face, again and again. It was against every rule in the book, but not a single one of us moved to stop him. Bert didn't even try to fight back. The guilt was written all over his face. The moment he knew we'd found something in the pig pen, he crumbled. He confessed to everything. Bert Hawkins told us that the previous evening, on his way back from town, he'd run into Lily Anderson walking home from school. She'd waved to him cheerfully. She remembered him as the nice man who gave out candy. But seeing that they were alone on the quiet road, Bert said a monstrous impulse took over. He lied to her, telling her he'd just gotten a few snow-white rabbits for his farm, and asked if she wanted to come see them. Lily, excited, agreed immediately, but when they got to the farm, there were no rabbits. He led her straight into the house. There, he raped her. Then he murdered her. At just 10 years old, she stood no chance against a man of his size. Afterward, to cover his tracks, he took a butcher knife, the same kind he used on his hogs, and dismembered her body. He then boiled the pieces in a large stock pot for hours. Finally, he tossed what was left of her into the pig pen and let his dozen or so massive hogs devour the remains. The whole process took all night. He was so exhausted he didn't do a thorough cleanup. which is why a few fragments of tissue were left behind. Her clothes, her backpack. He'd thrown them all into the furnace and burned them to ash. He thought he'd committed the perfect crime. He never expected us to be standing on his doorstep the very next day, holding pieces of his victim in an evidence bag. After hearing the confession, Miller hit him again, harder this time. Bert just gritted his teeth, taking the blows without a word, like he was trying to play the tough guy. But as we were cuffing him to take him away, he suddenly dropped to his knees and started begging. "My boy, he's upstairs. He can't take care of himself. Please, can you get someone to take him to his uncle's?" Miller spat on the floor. "You son of a bitch. Your kid is a kid, but someone else's daughter isn't? You're a monster." Miller lunged at him again, but I stepped in and held him back. The place wasn't exactly run by the book, but if a suspect died in our custody, we'd be the ones taking the fall. It wasn't worth it. Bert took the opportunity to slam his head on the floor over and over. A couple of deputies struggled to pull him up. Finally, one of the calmer guys on the team told him we'd make sure his son was looked after. Only then did Bert allow himself to be led away. The jarring contrast between his concern for his son and his utter lack of humanity for someone else's daughter was chilling. It was like looking at two different people in one body. It was terrifying. Bert Hawkins was booked and held at the county jail. All we needed was the official report from the medical examiner, and we could hand him over to the DA. Barring a miracle, he was looking at the death penalty. For the next 2 days, a heavy gloom hung over the entire department. Besides our own grief for that little girl, we had to deal with her family. Lily's parents had rushed back the night she disappeared. They hadn't eaten or slept, just searched frantically for their daughter. Now, all they had was the worst possible outcome. Their screams of anguish, the raw, soul-shattering pain. It was something none of us could tune out. Miller made the call not to tell them the full details of what happened to Lily. The rape, the dismemberment, the boiling, the pigs. He just told them their daughter had been murdered, the suspect was in custody, and her remains had not yet been recovered. But in a town that small, secrets don't stay buried. The day we arrested Bert, whispers had already started to spread. All we could do was push the case forward as fast as possible and get the monster who did this to face justice. An eye for an eye wouldn't be enough to quell the family's rage, but at least it would show everyone that the law doesn't let evil go unpunished. Because of this, Miller was on the phone with Dr. Evans constantly, pushing for the final report. Once that report came in, combined with Bert's confession and the evidence we already had, the human remains from the pig pen and the pig's stomachs, the tools we found in his house, we'd have an airtight case. The path forward seemed crystal clear. We never saw the twist coming. Dr. Evans delivered the report to Miller himself. Miller gave it a quick scan and then let out a sharp gasp. "What the hell is this?" Hearing that, I knew something was wrong. I walked over to his office just as he was looking up at Dr. Evans, his face pale with shock. It's not Lily Anderson." Dr. Evans nodded grimly. The tissue fragments were heavily contaminated, so the DNA took time. "You were pushing for answers, so we got Lily's medical records and did a preliminary blood type comparison. The victim is not Lily." Miller just stared, completely bewildered. If the body we found wasn't Lily, then who was it? And what the hell was Bert Hawkins's detailed confession all about? Miller stormed into the county jail with the report in his hand to interrogate Bert again. He had him brought to an interview room. It was a little unorthodox, but I stayed glued to his side, worried he might do something reckless. Miller started calm, reining in his fury. "You said in your statement that you met Lily Anderson on the road and lured her back to your house. Is that correct?" Bert nodded. "And you're sure you knew it was her? You live in the same village. You're positive it was Lily?" Yeah, I know her," Bert said quickly. That's when Miller finally snapped. He slammed his fist on the metal table, the sound echoing through the small room. "You're lying. The person you killed wasn't Lily Anderson." Bert's eyes went wide. He looked genuinely stunned. Even he seemed to be asking himself the same question. It was Lily. It had to be. Seeing Miller about to lose it again, I cut in. "Bert, did you even get a good look at her face?" Bert frowned, looking more and more confused. He didn't answer, but I already had a guess. This was getting stranger by the minute. His story about the dismemberment, the boiling, the pigs, it all matched the evidence at the scene. So the part that was wrong had to be the abduction, rape, and murder. If he'd actually done those things, how could he not know who his victim was? The truth was a tangled mess, but one question burned brighter than the rest. If the victim wasn't Lily, then who was she? I pressed him again. You burned her clothes and backpack, right? Didn't you check for a name? Bert just shook his head silently. Miller was still shouting. Spit it out. What really happened? Did you kill someone or just get rid of the body? Talk. Bert started trembling, repeating over and over, I killed her. I killed her. I just got confused. I was nervous. I was wrong about it being Lily, but I killed her. Finally, he admitted it. The victim wasn't Lily. I really thought it was her. I don't know all the girls in the village, but I was so sure. Miller looked like he was about to climb over the table. I pulled him back and kept questioning Bert. Then think about her clothes. What kind of shirt was she wearing? What kind of pants? Bert paused, thinking. A t-shirt, pink, and pants. Jeans, blue jeans. I scribbled it down. My gut told me Bert wasn't lying now. He really didn't know who the girl was. I used the word girl loosely because based on this interrogation, I was starting to suspect he hadn't raped anyone. But he had definitely dismembered a body. The two weren't mutually exclusive. The question was, who would he do something like that for? The answer was already forming in my mind. I pulled Miller out of the interrogation room. He was still fuming, cursing me for getting in his way. Once he calmed down, he arrived at the same conclusion I had. His son. It was my suspicion, too. People with intellectual disabilities can be unpredictable, sometimes prone to violence. Exactly, I said. What if a kid wouldn't play with him, and he lashed out and killed her by accident, and the father helped cover it up? What do you mean, a kid wouldn't play with him? Miller growled. Damn it, his son is over 20 years old. What? It was my turn to be shocked. I hadn't realized. This wasn't a case of a disabled child. It was a case of a disabled and potentially dangerous young man. If he came after you, all you could do was run. Because even if he killed you, he would never face the death penalty. Back at the department, Miller immediately laid out a new plan. First, bring in Bert's son, Cody Hawkins. Second, start a canvass to see if any family in the area had a child missing who was last seen wearing a pink shirt and blue jeans. Third, redeploy teams to continue the search for Lily Anderson. Only the first task went smoothly. But Cody Hawkins was, for all intents and purposes, nonverbal. His mind was completely disconnected from reality. We spent hours with him, trying every approach we could think of, and got absolutely nothing. All he did was giggle and mumble nonsensical phrases. Dada. Do stuff. Not me. Not me, not me. Go, pull. After listening for a long time, I couldn't make sense of any of it. It was infuriating. So we went back to work on Bert. This time, we came in hard from the start. Your son's in custody, Bert. He's back at the department, and he's telling us a lot. Now it's your turn. But if your story is one bit different from his, he's going down for this, and so are you. Bert panicked. He started pleading with us to let his son go, saying he wasn't right in the head. Even after raising a child like that, the love this man had for his son was fierce. He was still a father. After his emotional outburst, he confessed again. The second half of his original story was true, how he cut up the body, boiled it, fed it to the pigs. But the first half, the part where he lured a girl, raped her, and killed her, was a complete fabrication. He had been trying to take the fall for his son. The truth was Bert didn't even know the whole story himself. He said when he got home on the day of the crime, his son, Cody, was already in the living room with the body. It was a young girl about 10 years old. Her face had been smashed in, making her unrecognizable. Bert said he just froze. He yelled at Cody, hit him, trying to get an answer, but his son was incapable of explaining what happened. Bert then examined the body and discovered something even worse. The girl's lower body was a bloody mess. He assumed she'd been sexually assaulted. He knew that if this got out, his son might not just be sent to a psychiatric hospital. In a small, tight-knit community like this, someone might take matters into their own hands and kill him. A crime like raping and murdering a child was something people wouldn't stand for. So, in a moment of panic, he decided to get rid of the body and pretend it never happened. He said Cody had tried to stop him, crying and pulling him toward the door, as if he wanted to go back outside. Bert had to hit him again and lock him upstairs. Then, as if he were butchering an animal, he began the grisly task of disposing of the girl's body. At first, his only goal was to hide the crime. It was only after we arrested him the next day that he decided the best plan was to confess to everything himself. His own role in destroying the evidence was already exposed. By taking all the blame, he thought he could save his son. 6. This is a goddamn mess, Miller seethed after we left the interview room. If he'd just called us right away, none of this would be so complicated. He was right. If we'd been on the scene from the start, the case wouldn't have become this tangled. Worse, we were facing a brick wall, Cody Hawkins. He couldn't give us anything useful. We could pin him as the killer, but that was pointless. We needed the truth. Even if it turned out Cody was the killer, we had to investigate properly because there were still too many unanswered questions. For starters, who was the dead girl? And where was Lily Anderson? We had to solve one of those mysteries. Thankfully, my colleagues found a small clue on the security footage. It was about Lily. As we knew, the road cameras only covered up to the village entrance where the pavement ended. But right at that entrance, one of the deputies noticed something. The dirt road into the village forked into two paths, one heading northeast, the other northwest. Lily's house was to the northeast, but the footage showed her turning and walking northwest. That meant she wasn't going home. So where was she going? Miller sent us to her school to talk to her friends and teachers. We had to find out if she had plans to meet anyone that afternoon. He, meanwhile, led a team to go door to door in the village, asking again if anyone was missing a child. Both efforts came up empty. None of Lily's friends knew where she was going after class. And Miller's canvas was a dead end, too. No one in the village had a missing kid. Could the victim have been from out of town? Miller had already thought of that. He'd checked the missing person reports for the entire county. Nothing. Then a thought struck me. There was one group of people whose children could go missing without anyone ever filing a report. I had to be sure. 7. That night, I drove out to the edge of town alone. In an empty, overgrown lot, I found what I was looking for, a small, makeshift camp. It was crude, just a collection of worn-out tents. I don't know if you see groups like this much anymore, but back then, they existed, transient communities, people who moved from town to town, living off the grid and begging for money. They didn't break laws or cause trouble, so they were usually left alone to set up on unused land. During the day, they'd head into town, hitting up places with heavy foot traffic like the farmer's market or the strip mall. If anyone hassled them, the camp gave them a sense of safety in numbers. They'd stay in one place for a few months until people got tired of seeing them, then pack up and move on to the next town. Normally, the sheriff's department didn't have much to do with them. My uninvited arrival put them on edge. About 20 people, mostly men, crawled out of their tents, their eyes on me, as if to show their strength. I'd dealt with situations like this before, so I knew to ask for their unofficial leader. He was a one-eyed man who told me to call him Chun. I got straight to the point and asked if anyone from their group had gone missing recently. Seeing my badge, he had no choice but to cooperate. He told me yes. A few days ago, they'd lost a kid. Do you know what the child was wearing the day they disappeared? I asked quickly. Chun called over another man, a big, burly guy named Jedediah, or Jed. The missing kid, an 11-year-old named Sam, had been with him. But there was a problem. Jed wasn't Sam's father. The image of a young child traveling with a rough-looking man like him set off alarm bells. At first, Jed was reluctant to talk. He kept insisting the kid ran off and that it had nothing to do with them. He said they were planning to leave town soon anyway. I leaned on him with my authority as a detective, assuring him that if he told me the truth, I'd be out of his hair. He finally described what the missing child was wearing. A pink t-shirt and blue jeans. It was an exact match to what Bert Hawkins had described. But I still had my doubts. Why was a little girl traveling with a guy like you? What's your relationship? Jed looked at me, confused for a second, then said, Officer, Sam wasn't a girl. He was a boy. Now it was my turn to be stunned. I thought I found my victim, but was I wrong again? A pink t-shirt and jeans were common enough. My heart sank. Still, a missing child was a missing child, so I had to follow procedure and take a report. Jed explained that Sam was an orphan they had picked up along the way. He had no ID, no family they knew of. He said it was common for people to come and go in their line of work, so he never bothered to report Sam missing. Finally, after more pressure, he handed me a photograph. He held it out with his left hand. It was a group picture. There were 7 or 8 kids in it, likely taken around Christmas from the looks of the background. He pointed out a round-faced kid as Sam. That was all the information they could give me. I drove back and reported my findings to Miller that night. We agreed that we could put the identity of the dead child on the back burner for now. The most urgent task was clear: find Lily Anderson. 2 days had passed. Hope was fading, but Miller still believed Lily might still be alive. 8 the next morning, Miller led us on a grueling search. We headed northwest from Lily's village into an unforgiving landscape of wooded hills, ravines, and rivers. To be honest, the situation looked bleak. But Miller kept pushing us, telling us that as long as we hadn't found a body, there was still hope. And as long as there was hope, what we were doing mattered. He laid out a possible scenario. What if Lily had been there when Cody Hawkins attacked the other child? What if she saw it happen and managed to escape? Lost and scared as darkness fell, she could have gotten turned around in the woods, unable to find her way home. If that's what happened, he said, then we're that little girl's only chance. We believed him. We had to. It's why we became cops in the first place. So no matter what, we would give it everything we had. We pushed on under the blazing sun, searching every square foot of ground. Finally, we found a possible crime scene. Underneath a bridge, down by the riverbank, my colleagues found a single shoe. It matched the ones Lily was wearing the day she disappeared. There were also what looked like dried bloodstains on some rocks. The scene was degraded, but we called Dr. Evans out to collect samples. He arrived quickly and, after a field test, gave us his conclusion. It was human blood from a single individual. This was very likely where the unknown child had been attacked. The blood-spattered rocks nearby were almost certainly the murder weapon. This matched Bert's account of the victim's face and lower body being smashed beyond recognition. But Lily's shoe was here. It meant she had been at this spot, but she hadn't been injured here. She really had gotten away. Miller's theory might be right. Maybe she'd just been running so fast that her shoe flew off, but she had escaped Cody Hawkins's grasp. Cody probably didn't chase her because he was preoccupied with carrying the other victim's body back to his house. This seemingly logical chain of events energized the whole team. We picked up the pace. We searched from morning until afternoon. From afternoon until nightfall. No one even talked about stopping. Miller told us anyone who was tired could take a break. But no one did. We were running on pure adrenaline. We kept going, pushing through the dark woods, ignoring the snakes, the bugs, the constant mosquito bites. We never stopped. We were all listening, hoping to hear the faint cry of a lost little girl. And then finally, in a small clearing deep in the woods, we found Lily Anderson. She was tied to a tree with a rope, her body deliberately hidden by a pile of branches and leaves. If our flashlights hadn't been so powerful, if we hadn't been so meticulous in searching every corner, we would have missed her completely. After 2 days exposed to the elements, she was almost unrecognizable. Miller fell to his knees in front of the tree and wept. In the end, our worst fear had come true. The devil had won, and we hadn't been able to save the one person we were trying so desperately to save. Many of us broke down. I did too. 9DR. Evans and his team worked through the night on Lily's autopsy. That night, most of us, including Miller, just stayed at the office. Some of us might have dozed off. Others stared at the ceiling until dawn. Miller was a raw nerve of anger. I was honestly worried he was going to drive to the county jail and put a bullet in Cody Hawkins. But something about where Lily's body was found bothered me. Why would Cody tie her up in such a hidden spot, but carry the other, bloodier body all the way home? He's mentally disabled, Miller snapped. What kind of logic do you expect him to have? Then he just started muttering to himself, complaining about why the law didn't allow the death penalty for people with disabilities. That's why I was so afraid he'd take his gun to Cody. Before I knew it, morning had come. Dr. Evans came in person to deliver his findings. We gathered for a briefing, and what he told us was, once again, completely unexpected. First, Lily's time of death was within 3 hours of her disappearance. The cause of death was mechanical asphyxiation. In layman's terms, she'd been strangled. Second, the murder weapon was the rope used to tie her to the tree, and there was no evidence of sexual assault. Third, the knots on the rope were tied incredibly tight. Based on their structure, Dr. Evans concluded they were tied by someone who was left-handed. Are either the Hawkins men left-handed? I was stunned. So was Miller. Dr. Evans explained further. If Bert's confession is true, there's a timeline problem. He says his son brought the other body home at night, and then he locked him upstairs. But Lily was likely killed that night, too. In other words, Cody Hawkins might not be the killer. At least, not Lily's killer. Then, Dr. Evans added another strange finding. This one was from the final analysis of the first victim's remains. The samples from the pig pen had been difficult to work with, and the digestive process had been rapid, so the full report had taken time. He said we'd been operating under a major misunderstanding. The first victim was a boy. Miller and I were completely lost. Thinking back, no one had ever actually described the first victim's gender. We had been misled by the pink shirt and Bert's assumption of a sexual assault, and we had unconsciously decided the victim had to be a girl. But the person who had been assaulted was a boy. With Dr. Evans's help, Miller and I finally put a name to the victim. Sam? It had to be the missing boy from the transient camp. 10 after talking with Dr. Evans, Miller and I went back to the county jail to see Cody Hawkins. But it was useless. No matter how we tried to coax him, Cody was still lost in his own world. Sometimes he'd mutter, "Dead doing." Other times he'd yell, "Hit, hit, pull, pull." Nothing he said made any sense. On a hunch, I asked for a pen and paper and gave them to him, encouraging him to draw. Cody was surprisingly cooperative, grabbing the pen and scribbling all over the paper. While he was doing that, we went to see his father. Bert Hawkins was the same as before. He had nothing new to add, but he did admit he never actually checked the first victim's gender. All he saw was a mangled lower body and made an assumption based on the clothes. He just assumed his son had committed an unthinkable crime. Miller asked him again to confirm if he or his son were left-handed. Bert stated firmly that they were both right-handed. Miller believed him. By this point, we suspected that whoever killed Lily, it wasn't Cody Hawkins. It was even possible that the person who killed Sam was someone else entirely. A left-handed person. That hit me when he gave me the photograph at the camp. The transient, Jed, he had used his left hand, and he'd used his left index finger to point out which kid in the photo was Sam. His dominant hand was his left. It had to be more than a coincidence. Sam was the kid traveling with Jed. After we finished with Bert, I immediately told Miller about my suspicion. He shot up from his chair. "I'm taking a team to that camp right now to lock those people down. You stay here and work on the kid. I'm going to get him." He rushed out before I could say another word. I knew how desperate he was, so I didn't try to stop him. I just went back to see Cody. By then, he had produced several drawings. Calling them drawings was a stretch. They were more like violent scribbles. But in one of them, I could clearly make out a horrifying scene drawn with simple stick figures. In one drawing, one figure was on top of another. In another, a figure was holding a rock high above its head. I pointed to the attacker in the drawing and asked Cody, "Is this you?" Cody shook his head, muttering, "Not me, not me. Hit, him, hit." He wasn't drawing himself. He was drawing a third person. It clicked. He was hitting this person with a rock, right? Then what had he been trying to say before? That save sound he kept making? I kept looking through his drawings and found one where the person who had been holding the rock was now lying on the ground. My hand started to shake. I pointed to the drawing again. "Did you knock down the bad man? Were you trying to save the child?" Cody nodded his head enthusiastically, making a sound like uh-huh. No, he wasn't a killer. He wasn't saying doing. He was saying save him. He wasn't a murderer. He was trying to be a hero. That's why he carried the body home. He wanted his father to help him save the child. I looked at Cody's innocent, vacant face. Maybe all this time, he never even realized the child was already dead. He had no idea what kind of trouble he was in, or that he'd nearly sent his own father to prison. It was tragic, absolutely heartbreaking. 11 I called Miller as soon as I left the jail. He and his team had already reached the camp and had everyone contained. They got in there just in time. Cho was about to pack up and move everyone out. To avoid tipping his hand, Miller spoke to Chun first. He learned that Jed had been acting strangely for the past few days, constantly urging Chun to get them out of town, but never giving a clear reason why. And yes, Jed was a lefty. Miller had all the transients gather in an open area while his deputies searched their tents, but they found nothing of evidentiary value. We had no hard evidence to tie Jed to the crimes. If we interrogated him and he lawyered up, he might walk. Miller was worried about how to proceed. I quickly relayed everything I had learned and suspected from Cody's drawings. "Cody wasn't the killer," I said. Jed killed both kids. That animal. I'll kill him. Hold on, Miller. We have to make him confess. I have an idea. Miller agreed to my plan. He had his deputies take everyone from the camp in for questioning. Everyone except Jed. On the ride back to the station, no one was allowed to speak to him. No matter what he asked, he was met with dead silence. That was step one. Create crippling doubt and anxiety. Make him wonder what we knew. Back at the station, Miller and I sat across from him in an interrogation room, our faces grim. Miller slammed his hand on the table and began reciting the state's homicide statute in a loud, menacing voice. First-degree murder in this state is punishable by death or life in prison without parole, but a confession and cooperation are taken into consideration. Bottom line, talk now, and it's easier. Stay quiet, and we throw the book at you. Jed was already shaking. I leaned forward and spoke in a calmer tone. We're giving you a chance, Jed. Tell us where you hid the girl's body, and I can talk to the judge, maybe get you a deal. We hadn't released the news that we'd found Lily's body, so Jed wouldn't know. That was step two. Make him think he still had a bargaining chip. If he told us where the body was, it was a full confession. While Jed hesitated, I slid Cody's drawings across the table. That disabled kid who saw you, the one who took the other kid's body? He told us everything. He even drew pictures. See for yourself. Jed stared at the chaotic scribbles, completely baffled. I delivered the final blow. Confess now, and you make it easy on us, and maybe a little easier on yourself. If you don't, we'll tear this whole town apart until we find her. And when we do, we will make sure you never see the light of day again. Jed looked at me, a flicker of hope and doubt in his eyes. If I tell you where the girl is, that's it? I nodded. And then he broke. He told us everything. 12, the whole horrifying truth came pouring out. What kind of monster Jedediah was, I don't need to explain. It all started because Sam wanted to leave the transient group. Jed wanted to keep him there. The reason was Sam had made a friend, Lily Anderson. She didn't care that he was homeless. She would meet him after school to play. She was even teaching him how to read. So Sam told Jed he wasn't going with him anymore. The problem was Jed had been preying on the vulnerable boys in his care for years. He hadn't gotten his hands on Sam yet, and he wasn't about to let him go. That night, he followed Sam to the bridge and assaulted him. Sam fought back, but he was no match for Jed. After he was done, to hide the evidence of what he'd done, Jed smashed Sam's face and lower body with a rock. Just then, Lily arrived. She screamed and ran, losing a shoe in her panic. Jed was terrified and was about to dispose of Sam's body when Cody Hawkins appeared out of nowhere. Cody started yelling and pushed Jed away, then picked up Sam's lifeless body. Jed, thinking fast, made a choice. He let Cody take the body and went after Lily. He figured the strange, disabled man would take the blame if the body was found with him. Lily, meanwhile, was lost and terrified in the woods. Jed caught up to her, and then the tragedy repeated itself. He strangled her, tied her to a tree, and carefully hid her body with branches. Then he walked back to the camp as if nothing had happened and went back to his life of begging. Why didn't he just run? Because he had experience. This wasn't his first time killing someone. Years before, he'd taken in another teenage boy, and when his predatory instincts took over, he'd ended up killing and burying him. On that occasion, hiding within the transient group had worked perfectly. The police never even considered him a suspect. So this time, he tried to do it again. Especially after I came to the camp alone that night and left with nothing, he became even more confident that as long as he stayed with the group, he was safe. But in the end, justice finds a way. Some demons belong in hell. 13 with the killer's confession and the corroborating evidence. The case was quickly handed over to the DA. Jedediah was sentenced to death. The true victims were Lily and her family. Finding her body only brought them a fresh wave of grief. As for Sam, we never found any official records for him, no family to notify. He was destined to be a ghost. And the most innocent of all were Cody Hawkins and his father, Bert. One was disabled by birth. The other was disabled by a blind, foolish love for his son. Bert would serve time for desecration of a corpse and obstruction, but Cody would not. As a person with a severe mental illness, the most he would face was mandatory treatment at a state facility. Miller promised the foolish father that he would look after his son until Bert got out of prison. Bert wept like a child. There was one thing that still bothered me. Why was Cody out there in the wilderness in the first place? He showed up around the same time as Lily. Had he been following her? I wanted to see him one last time. He was still lost in his own world, unable to answer any of my questions. On an impulse, I showed him pictures of Lily and Sam. I asked him, "Do you know these two?" When he saw the photos, Cody's face broke into a wide, simple grin. He mumbled two words over and over. "Friend, friend." He smiled, and then he started to cry, fat tears rolling down his cheeks. He knew they were gone. I suddenly remembered a detail from Bert's confession. When he was about to dismember Sam's body, Cody had pulled him toward the door, as if he wanted to go back outside. Of course, he wanted to go save Lily. I finally understood why he was at the crime scene, and a single, heartbreaking image formed in my mind. The sun is setting, a gentle breeze rippling across the water. Under a bridge, two children sit side by side, one reading to the other, sharing secrets. Nearby, a young man in his 20s with the mind of a child splashes clumsily in the river. Every so often, he turns and does something silly, making the two children burst into laughter. And seeing them laugh, he laughs too.